Please, don't sell me, a girl pleaded to a Hell's Angel. His response left everyone in shock. The snow came down in thick, heavy sheets that night. It covered the park benches. It blanketed the empty swings. It swallowed the sound of footsteps and traffic until the whole world felt muffled and far away. The yellow glow of the street lamps barely cut through the darkness, casting pale circles of light onto the white ground below. Lily Carter sat on the very edge of a park bench, hunched forward, her thin arms wrapped tight around the small, bundled weight of her baby brother Max. She had tucked him against her chest, as close as she could get him, trying to share what little warmth her tiny body had left. His blanket was damp at the edges from the falling snow. She kept pulling it back up over his face, over and over, every time the wind pushed it down. She was 6 years old. Her coat was the color of a faded sunflower, yellow once, now more of a pale cream from too many washes. It had a broken zipper that stopped halfway up her chest, and no matter how many times she tried to close it the rest of the way, it never would. She had stuffed the front flap over Max like a little shield, but the cold still found her. It always did. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Her feet dangled off the bench. She was too small for them to touch the ground. Max fussed softly against her shoulder, a low, tired sound. Not a full cry, just that small, whimpering noise he made when something was wrong, but he didn't have the energy to say so any louder. Lily pressed her cheek to the top of his head and rocked him side to side the way she had seen her mother do a long time ago, before everything changed. "Shh," she whispered. I got you, Maxie." But her voice cracked when she said it. She looked up toward the far end of the path, where the park gate stood open, its iron bars dark against the white. Her step-aunt's figure had disappeared through that gate maybe 5 minutes ago, maybe 10. Lily had stopped counting. She had watched those footsteps punch through the snow and then vanish into the night without a single look back. Just like that. Gone. Lily pressed her lips together hard. She would not cry. She had told herself that. But her eyes filled up anyway, and 2 warm tears slid down her cheeks and went cold almost immediately in the winter air. She did not fully understand everything that had happened tonight. She was only 6, and some of the words the adults had used made no sense to her. But she understood the feeling. She understood the way her step-aunt had grabbed her arm too tight outside the car. She understood the low, mean voice, and the stranger who had looked at her like she was something to be bought and then sent away. She understood that the word her step-aunt had used, more than once, was sell. That word sat heavy inside her chest like a stone. She pulled Max tighter and looked out at the empty park. The swings moved in the wind. The snow kept falling. She did not know what was going to happen next. She heard the motorcycle before she saw it. A deep, rolling rumble cut through the muffled quiet of the snow. It got louder, then slowed, then stopped somewhere just beyond the park entrance. The engine went silent. Footsteps followed, heavy and sure, crunching through the snow along the path toward the benches. Lily's whole body went stiff. She pulled Max in even tighter and turned her face toward the sound. The man who stepped into the lamplight was big. Broad shoulders, a dark jacket covered in patches, a heavy beard dusted with snow. He was older, maybe her teacher's age or more, and his face was the kind of face that had seen hard things. Deep lines, tired eyes. He stopped when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he stepped closer, slowly, and lowered himself down onto one knee in the snow right in front of the bench. He did not rush. He did not grab. He just knelt there, putting himself at her level, and looked at her with those tired eyes that were not unkind. He waited. That was the thing that surprised her most. He did not reach out. He did not speak first. He just stayed there, on one knee in the snow, patient and still. like he had all the time in the world, like the cold did not bother him at all. Lily stared at him. Her whole body was shaking now, not just from the cold, but from something else too, something that lived deep in her chest and made it hard to breathe right. The man's eyes moved from her face down to Max, then back up again. His expression did not change much, but something shifted behind his eyes. Something quiet. "Hey," he said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel rolled around in a tin can. But it was not mean. "You two okay?" Lily said nothing. Her teeth were chattering so hard she could feel it in her jaw, in her ears, all the way up to the top of her head. Max stirred against her shoulder and made that small, tired sound again. The man looked at the baby, then at Lily's coat, the broken zipper, the thin fabric doing almost nothing against the winter air. His jaw tightened, just a little. "Where's your mom?" he asked. Lily shook her head. "Dad?" She shook it again. He was quiet for a moment. The snow fell between them, soft and steady. Lily looked at his jacket. It was covered in patches and pins, and the biggest one on the back she had seen from when he walked up had a skull on it. She had seen jackets like that before. Her step-aunt had pointed at men like him once and said they were dangerous, said to stay away. But her step-aunt had also tried to sell her. Lily looked back at his face, at those tired eyes that stayed steady and calm, at the way he had not moved any closer than she was ready for. Her chin wobbled. She fought it hard. She pressed her lips together and squeezed Max a little tighter and tried to hold everything in the way she always did. But she was so cold and so tired, and she had been holding it together for so long tonight that there was almost nothing left to hold with. Her voice came out small, barely more than a breath. "Please," she whispered. "Don't sell me." The words just fell out of her. She had not planned them. She had not even known they were coming. But once they were out there, hanging in the cold air between them, she felt the tears spill over and she could not stop them. The man's face changed. Not in a scary way. In a way that looked almost like something broke open behind his eyes. His brow pulled together and his jaw went tight, and he looked at her for a long moment, like those 3 words had hit him somewhere deep and tender that he had not expected. He let out a slow breath through his nose. Then he reached out carefully and laid one big, rough hand very gently on top of her small one. "Nobody is selling you," he said. His voice was quiet and firm and did not waver even a little. "You hear me? Nobody." Lily stared at him. More tears slipped down her cold cheeks. He looked at Max, then back at her. Then he stood up to his full height and reached down with both arms, open and steady. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you warm." She hesitated for only a second. Then she leaned forward and let him take them both. He lifted them like they weighed nothing, tucking Max carefully against one side of his chest and pulling Lily in close to the other. He wrapped his big leather jacket around them as best he could, blocking the wind. "Not on my watch," he muttered, almost to himself. He turned away from the bench and started walking back through the snow toward his motorcycle, both small forms bundled tight against him. The ride through the woods was slow and careful. Jack kept one hand firm on the handlebars, and the other pressed against the children tucked inside his jacket. The trees on either side of the narrow dirt road were tall and dark, their branches heavy with snow. The headlight of his motorcycle cut a single pale path through the night. Lily had her face buried against his chest. She was not sleeping. He could feel her little body still trembling, still tense, still holding on tight to Max with both arms. The baby had gone quiet again, which was either a good thing or it was not. Jack was not sure yet. He kept his eyes on the road, and his mind focused on moving fast enough to get them warm, but slow enough not to scare them. The cabin came into view through the trees. It was not much to look at from the outside. Small and square, built from old timber that had gone dark with age and weather. Snow had piled up along the roof and gathered in the corners of the window frames. A thin trail of smoke curled up from the stone chimney and disappeared into the black sky above the tree line. Jack cut the engine and let the bike roll to a stop in the clearing out front. The sudden quiet felt thick and heavy, broken only by the soft sound of snow settling in the branches above them. He got off carefully, one arm still bracing the children. "We're here," he said quietly. Lily lifted her head just a little. She looked at the cabin through half-closed eyes, her cheeks still wet from crying. She did not say anything. She just watched as Jack carried them up the 2 wooden porch steps and pushed the front door open with his shoulder. The warmth hit them first. It rolled out from inside like something alive, rich and golden, wrapping around all 3 of them the moment they crossed the threshold. The fire in the stone hearth at the far wall was already going strong, orange flames licking at a thick stack of split logs. The light from it filled the room with a warm amber glow that made everything look soft. The cabin was simple inside. A worn wooden floor, a heavy table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen tucked into one corner with a cast-iron stove, a narrow bed pushed against one wall, covered in a thick quilt, and near the fire, an old armchair with a cracked leather seat and a low wooden bench beside it. Jack carried the children straight to the hearth and lowered himself carefully onto the bench, keeping both of them close. He reached over to a cedar chest beside the wall and pulled out 2 blankets, thick wool ones that smelled faintly of cedar and wood smoke. He draped one around Lily's shoulders and tucked the other around Max, making sure the baby's small hands and feet were covered. Max blinked in the firelight. His dark eyes caught the glow and held it for a moment. Then his little mouth curved just slightly. Jack looked at that tiny, almost smile for a beat longer than he meant to. He cleared his throat and stood up. He crossed to the kitchen and set a small pot on the stove, pouring milk in from a carton he had in the cooler and adding 2 big spoonfuls of cocoa powder. He stirred it slowly, watching it steam. When it was warm and smooth, he poured it into a tin mug and carried it back to the fire. He held it out to Lily. "Careful," he said. "It's hot." She looked at the mug, then up at him, then back at the mug. She reached out with both hands and took it. She wrapped her small fingers around it and held it close to her chest, letting the warmth seep in. She took one careful sip. Something in her shoulders dropped. Not all the way, not completely, but enough. The rigid, braced way she had been holding herself since the park softened just a little at the edges. Her tears slowed. She leaned into the blanket and stared at the fire, the mug still pressed close, and breathed. Lily finished the last of her cocoa and set the mug down carefully on the floor beside her. She looked up at Jack, then at the pile of blankets he had arranged near the hearth, close enough to feel the heat, but not close enough to be dangerous. He had folded one blanket thick and flat like a little mattress, and laid another one open on top for covering. "You 2 sleep here tonight," he said. "It's the warmest spot." She did not argue. She just slid off the bench and settled herself down onto the blankets, pulling Max in close beside her. The baby made a small sound, something between a grunt and a sigh, and then nestled into her side. His round cheek pressed against the wool. His eyes fluttered and closed. Lily watched him for a moment. Then she pulled the top blanket up over both of them and tucked it under Max's chin with a carefulness that looked practiced, like she had done it 100 times before. Jack stayed in the armchair. He did not turn on a lamp. The fire gave enough light, warm and shifting, painting the room in shades of amber and shadow. He leaned back and laced his fingers together across his stomach and just sat. The quiet stretched out between them. Then Lily spoke. She said someone would pay a lot for me. Her voice was small, matter of fact, like she was telling him what she had eaten for lunch. Aunt Bev. She said it on the phone. She didn't know I heard. Jack did not move. He kept his face still and his voice easy. When did you hear that? 2 days ago. Lily kept her eyes on the fire. She made me stay in the closet after that. She said it was so I wouldn't run. But I was scared she was going to come back with somebody. Jack's jaw tightened. He breathed slow through his nose. She left you at the park, he said. She got a phone call. Lily pulled the blanket a little higher. She got mad at whoever it was. Real mad. Then she just walked away and didn't come back. She paused. I waited a long time. I know, Jack said quietly. I didn't know what to do with Max. Her voice cracked just slightly on her brother's name, and she stopped. She looked down at him, sleeping against her side. He was so cold. I kept putting my hands around his feet to warm them up. Jack looked at the ceiling for a moment. He pressed his back teeth together and breathed. You did good, he said. You kept him safe. Lily did not respond to that right away. She ran one small finger gently along Max's hairline, smoothing down a little tuft of dark hair that had gone sideways. My mom used to do that, she said softly. Smooth his hair like that. Where's your mom? Jack asked. He kept his voice gentle, careful. Gone. The word came out flat. Not angry, just worn out, like she had already spent all her feeling on it a long time ago. She left after Max was born. Daddy left before that. Aunt Bev said she was doing us a favor taking us in. Lily's mouth pressed into a thin line. I don't think that was a favor. Jack did not say anything to that. There was nothing to say. He sat in the amber light and listened to the fire pop and shift. He looked at this small girl who had carried her baby brother through the cold and the fear and the waiting, who had heard things no child should ever hear, and who was still here, still breathing, still tucking blankets under her little brother's chin. He thought about his own empty years, the long stretches of road and noise and belonging nowhere, the way a man could be surrounded by a whole crowd of people and still feel like he was standing alone in a cold field with the wind cutting right through him. He knew what alone felt like. He leaned forward in the chair and rested his elbows on his knees, whatever it cost him, whatever he had to do. These two were not going back out into the cold, not ever again. Jack was up before the sun. He moved through the cabin quietly, the old floorboards familiar enough under his boots that he knew which ones to avoid. He pulled on his jacket and his gloves and slipped out the front door without making a sound. The cold hit him like a wall. The sky was still dark purple at the edges, just barely starting to lighten in the east. Snow had fallen again overnight, thin and dry, dusting over everything in a fresh layer of white. The trees stood still. No wind. No birds yet. Just silence and cold and the pale light of early morning creeping in slow. Jack stood on the porch for a moment and looked out. Then he stepped down into the snow and started walking. He moved around the perimeter of the cabin in a wide loop, his eyes down, reading the ground the way a man learns to read it after years of needing to know who is coming and from where. The fresh snow was good for that. It kept records. It told the truth. Most of what he found was nothing. Rabbit tracks near the tree line. The three-toed print of a bird cutting across the open ground near the woodpile. His own boot prints from the night before, half filled in now by the overnight snowfall. Then he found the others. They were on the north side of the cabin, in the narrow space between the tree line and the clearing. 2 sets, boot prints, adult-sized. They came out of the trees and moved toward the cabin in a line, then stopped maybe 30 feet out. Then they turned and went back into the woods. Jack crouched down and looked at them carefully. The edges were soft. Not fresh, not from this morning. They had been made sometime in the night, and the light snowfall had rounded them out just slightly. Someone had come close. Close enough to see the cabin windows. Close enough to see the light from the fire. Then they had left. Jack stayed crouched for a long moment. He was not panicking. He did not do that. But something cold moved through him that had nothing to do with the temperature. He stood up and looked at the tree line. The woods were still and dark between the trunks. Nothing moved. He went back inside. Lily was still asleep, curled on her side with one arm draped over Max. The baby was awake, blinking up at the ceiling with the calm, patient look babies sometimes get, like they are thinking about something very serious. Jack checked on him first, touching the back of his fingers to the baby's forehead, checking his color. He seemed okay. Warm enough. Jack put a small pot of oatmeal on the stove and kept his thoughts moving while his hands worked. Someone had been out there. Whether it was connected to the children or just some local out walking in the dark, he did not know. But he was not the kind of man who believed in coincidences. He needed information. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket and scrolled to a name he had not called in over a year. Denny Marsh. A man who kept his ear close to the ground and his mouth mostly shut, which made him valuable. Denny had connections across 3 counties and knew where money moved and where trouble followed it. Jack pressed call. It rang 4 times. Then a rough, sleepy voice answered. "Bit early, Jack." "I need information," Jack said. "Woman named Beverly Crane. Goes by Bev. She had 2 kids in her care. I need to know who she owes." A pause. The sound of movement on the other end. Then Denny's voice came back sharper, the sleep gone out of it. "Bev Crane." He said the name slow. "Jack, that woman is in deep with Ridley Boone's crew. Has been for months. She owes them serious money." Another pause. "Where did you come across that name?" Jack looked over at Lily, sleeping by the fire. "She left something behind," he said. "Something that belongs to me now." Jack did not waste time. By mid-morning, he had made 3 more calls, short ones, direct. He used names sparingly and said only what needed to be said. By the time Lily had eaten her oatmeal and Max had been changed and fed, Jack had arranged everything. The meeting would happen at noon. A roadside diner called Patty's, 12 miles from the cabin. Neutral ground. Public enough that nothing stupid would happen, but quiet enough that voices could stay low. He called a woman named Rosa, a retired nurse who had patched up more than a few of his brothers over the years, and who asked no questions she did not need the answers to. Rosa agreed to come sit with the children for 2 hours. She arrived in a battered green pickup, carrying a paper bag with animal crackers and a soft blanket she had knitted herself. Lily looked at her with wide, cautious eyes. "She's good people," Jack said quietly, crouching to Lily's level. "I'll be back before you know it, okay?" Lily looked at Rosa, then back at Jack. She gave a small, serious nod. He squeezed her hand once. Then he left. Patty's diner smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease. The booths were red vinyl, cracked at the corners, and patched with electrical tape. A small television mounted above the counter played a weather report with the sound turned low. Only 2 other customers sat inside, both at the counter, both focused on their plates. Jack took the booth in the back corner. He sat with his back to the wall, facing the door, and ordered a black coffee he did not intend to drink. He waited. Beverly Crane walked in at 4 minutes past noon. She was a thin woman, somewhere in her late 30s, with sharp cheekbones and dark circles under her eyes that no amount of makeup could completely hide. She wore a puffy orange coat, unzipped, and her hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes moved fast when she came through the door. They swept the room before they found him. When they did, she stopped walking for just a second. Then she came to the booth and sat down across from him without a word. Jack looked at her. He did not say anything right away. He let the silence sit between them. She broke first. "Where are they?" she asked. Her voice was thin, controlled, but just barely. "Safe," Jack said. "They're not yours to keep." "No," he said. "They're not yours either, not anymore." He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "I know about Ridley Boone, Bev. I know what you owe him. And I know why you were trying to sell that little girl." The color drained out of her face. "You don't know anything," she said. "I know enough." He leaned forward slightly. "Boone and I go back. Far back. And he owes me something he has been putting off paying for 2 years now." He paused. "I made a call this morning. Your debt to him is settled. Done. You walk out of here clean." Her lips parted. She stared at him like she was trying to figure out the angle. People like Beverly Crane always looked for the angle. "What do you want?" she whispered. "The children," Jack said simply. "You walk away. You don't come back. You don't call. You don't send anyone. You disappear from their lives completely." Her jaw tightened. Something moved behind her eyes. Something complicated and ugly. Then, her shoulders dropped and she looked away, toward the window, where a thin snow was starting to fall again against the glass. "Fine," she said. The word came out hard and flat. "Fine. Take them." She pushed herself up from the booth, but then she stopped. She turned back, and her eyes were cold. "Don't get too comfortable," she said quietly. "Things change. People change their minds." She pulled her coat closed. "You might think this is over, Jack, but I'll do what I have to do." She walked out. The little bell above the diner door rang once as it swung shut behind her. Jack sat very still and watched the snow fall against the glass. The morning came in quietly. Pale gray light crept through the cabin's small windows, and the fire had burned down to a soft, orange glow. Jack was up before either of the children stirred. He moved around the kitchen slowly, careful not to make too much noise. He had slept in the armchair near the fire, waking up twice through the night to check on them. Old habits. He found a carton of eggs in the back of the refrigerator and half a loaf of bread on the counter. He cracked 4 eggs into a pan and set 2 slices of bread to toast on the stovetop rack the old-fashioned way, laying them flat over the low flame and watching them careful. The eggs sizzled gently. The smell of warm toast drifted through the cabin. He heard a small sound from the blankets near the fire. Lily was awake. She lay perfectly still, the blanket pulled up to her chin, watching him with those big, careful eyes. She did not say anything. She just watched. Jack glanced over at her. "Eggs okay?" he asked. She blinked, gave a small nod. "Good," he said and turned back to the pan. He made her plate first. Scrambled eggs, a little soft. Nothing fancy. He cut the toast into triangles the way he had once seen someone do for a kid at a diner years ago, and had never forgotten. He set the plate on the low wooden coffee table near the blankets and pulled up a chair. Lily sat up slowly, holding Max against her side with one arm. The baby blinked slowly in the warm light, his dark eyes unfocused and sleepy. "You can set him down," Jack said. "Right there on the blanket. He won't roll anywhere." Lily looked at the blanket. Then she carefully laid Max down on his back, tucking the edge of the blanket around his small legs. She watched him for a moment before she reached for her fork. She ate carefully. Small bites. Her eyes moved from her plate to Jack and back again, steady and quiet, like she was reading him, looking for something that might change, something that might turn. Jack stayed in his chair and drank his coffee. He did not crowd her. He did not push conversation. He had learned in the last 24 hours that Lily did not need to be talked at. She needed space, quiet. She needed to figure things out for herself. After a few minutes, she spoke. "You put the toast in triangles," she said. "Yep," Jack said. She looked down at her plate. "My mom used to do that," she said softly. Jack held his coffee cup in both hands and said nothing. He just nodded once, slow and easy. Lily took another small bite. Something in her shoulders had come down just a little. Not all the way, but a little. Jack let himself breathe. He got up after a while to rinse his cup in the sink. He glanced over at Max on the blanket. The baby had been quiet since waking, which had seemed fine at first. Sleepy baby. Cold night. That made sense. But something made Jack look again. He set his cup down and walked over. He crouched beside the blanket and looked at Max more carefully. The baby's chest was rising and falling, but the rhythm was off. Not smooth. There was a slight hitch to it, like each breath took a little more effort than it should. And the color of Max's face, in the gray morning light, was not quite right. There was a pallor to it, a faint, bluish tinge around his lips that had not been there the night before. Jack put the back of his hand close to the baby's cheek without touching him. He watched the small chest rise, watched it fall, watched the way it stuttered just slightly on the inhale. His stomach dropped. He looked up at Lily. She was watching him now, her fork frozen in her hand, her eyes wide. "Is Maxie okay?" she asked in a very small voice. Jack did not answer Lily right away. He kept his eyes on Max. The baby's little chest rose and fell with that same uneven rhythm, each breath working just a bit too hard. Jack had seen a lot of things in his 45 years. He had been in bar fights and backroom deals, and situations that would make most men go pale. But something about that tiny, struggling chest made his heart clench in a way nothing else ever had. He reached out and gently touched Max's hand. The baby's fingers were cool. Not cold like the night air outside, but cool in a way that did not feel right for a baby bundled in blankets beside a warm fire. Jack leaned in closer. He looked at the color around Max's mouth again. That faint bluish tint was still there. Not deep, not dramatic, but unmistakable if you knew what you were looking at. Jack knew what he was looking at. Years ago, before the road and the club and everything that came with it, he had ridden with a guy named Decker. Big, quiet man. His youngest daughter had been born with something wrong with her heart. Jack had spent enough time around that little girl, watching her parents manage her care, that he had picked up more than most people ever needed to know about what a struggling baby looked like. That bluish tint around the lips, the labored breathing, the pale skin that did not have enough warmth in it. These were not signs of a common cold or a rough night. These were signs that a baby's body was not moving oxygen the way it should. Jack's jaw tightened. He stood up straight and turned to Lily. She was sitting completely still on the blanket, her plate forgotten, her eyes fixed on his face. She was reading him again, looking for the truth in his expression before he even spoke. He made his voice calm and steady. "He's having a little trouble breathing," he said. "I'm going to take care of it." "Is he going to be okay?" Lily asked. Her voice was very careful, like she was afraid of what the answer might be. Jack crouched down so he was at her level. He looked her straight in the eye. "I am going to do everything I can," he said. "That's a promise." Lily held his gaze for a long moment. Then she gave a small, tight nod and looked back at Max. Jack stood and moved to the far side of the cabin. He picked up his phone from the counter and stared at it for a moment, turning the decision over in his mind. Calling 911 was the obvious answer. Any ordinary person would have dialed it already. But Jack was not an ordinary person, and his situation was not an ordinary one. The moment authorities showed up, questions would follow. Questions about who these children were. Questions about who Jack was. About why two kids with no parents in sight were living in a remote cabin, with a man wearing a Hell's Angel patch on his back. He could not risk it. Not yet. Not until he understood more about where Lily and Max had come from legally, and who might come looking for them under the cover of the system rather than the street. He needed someone who could get Max real medical help. A doctor, or someone with the knowledge of one. Someone who would not ask the kind of questions that put children back in danger. He scrolled through his contacts slowly. His thumb moved past names he had not called in years. Some of those names belonged to people he owed. Some belonged to people who owed him. He was looking for a very specific kind of name. Someone discreet. Someone who understood that some situations lived outside the lines of what the official world could fix. He found the name he was looking for, near the bottom of the list. Doc Reeves. Jack pressed call and lifted the phone to his ear. The phone rang 3 times before a rough, sleepy voice picked up. "Do you know what time it is?" "I need your help, Doc." Jack kept his voice low. He glanced over his shoulder at Lily, who was stroking Max's cheek with one gentle finger. "I've got a baby. 9 months old. Breathing wrong. Bluish tint around the mouth. Skin's too cool." There was a pause. The sound of sheets shifting. Doc Reeves was fully awake now. Jack could hear it in the silence. "How long has he been showing these signs?" "I noticed it this morning. But looking back, I think it's been building for a day or two." Another pause. "That tint around the mouth, is it constant? Or does it come and go?" "Constant. Faint, but constant." Doc Reeves let out a slow breath. "That's not good, Jack. That sounds like it could be a cardiac issue. Maybe a congenital defect. Something that affects how the blood carries oxygen. A baby that age should be pink and warm, not what you're describing." Jack's grip tightened on the phone. "Can you come out here?" "I am a veterinarian, Jack. I know what you are. I can patch a bullet wound and set a broken arm in a pinch, but a sick infant with a possible heart condition?" Doc Reeves paused again. "That's beyond me. You need a pediatric specialist, someone who deals with cardiac issues in children." Jack closed his eyes for a second. "I can't call 911, Doc." "I figured that, or you wouldn't be calling me." The older man's voice was steady and without judgment. That was one of the things Jack had always respected about him. "Let me make some calls. I know a few people. Not all doctors stay inside the system, you know. Some of them left for their own reasons." "How long do you need?" "Give me an hour. Keep the baby warm. Upright if he'll tolerate it. It can help with the breathing." "And Jack?" Doc Reeves lowered his voice. "Watch him closely. If that tint gets darker or his breathing gets noticeably worse, you drive to the nearest hospital and you deal with the consequences later. You hear me?" "Heard." Jack ended the call. He stood at the counter for a moment. Then he walked back to the blankets and carefully shifted Max into a more upright position, propping him gently against a rolled blanket, so his little chest was raised. Max stirred and fussed softly. His small face scrunched up. Then he settled again, his breathing sounding just a fraction easier. Lily watched every movement Jack made. "What did the person say?" she asked. "Said to keep him warm, and sitting up a little." Jack adjusted the blanket around Max's shoulders. "That's what we're going to do." "Are you scared?" Lily asked quietly. Jack looked at her. The question was honest and direct in the way that only children could manage. He thought about giving her a reassuring answer that was not quite true. Then he decided she deserved better than that. "A little," he said. "But being scared just means you care. And caring means you're going to try your hardest. So that's what I'm doing." Lily seemed to think about that. Then she nodded and tucked herself close to Max without another word. Jack went back to his phone. He spent the next 40 minutes working through his network, the way he would work through a mechanical problem. Methodically. One connection leading to the next. He called a man named Rourke, who ran a clubhouse 3 counties over, and was owed a favor from Jack going back 5 years. Rourke pointed him toward a woman named Sasha, who sometimes helped club members get medical care without paperwork. Sasha gave him a name. That name led to another number. The call that mattered came 45 minutes after Doc Reeves had hung up. The voice on the other end was calm and businesslike. A man named Briggs. He said he could arrange a specialist. Someone who had worked with children's heart conditions for 20 years before leaving his hospital post under circumstances nobody talked about. I can have him out to you within 24 hours, Briggs said. But I need you to understand something, Jack. Arranging this kind of visit draws attention. The kind of people who know this man, they are going to know someone out your way needed him. Word travels. You understand what I'm saying? Jack stared at the fire across the room. I understand. Good, Briggs said. Then we have a deal. But you'd better be ready for what comes with it. The afternoon light was soft and gray through the cabin windows. Snow was still falling outside, slow and steady, like it had nowhere else to be. Lily had found a small pile of pine cones near the woodpile by the door. She had carried them over to the braided rug in front of the fire and arranged them in a careful row. Max was propped up on his blanket roll nearby, watching her with sleepy eyes. His breathing had stayed steady since morning. Not perfect, but steady. Jack sat in the wooden chair by the window, keeping one eye on Max and one eye on the tree line outside. He had a mug of coffee in his hands. It had gone cold an hour ago, but he hadn't put it down. Lily lined up the last pine cone and then sat back on her heels, studying her row with a serious expression. My mama used to do crafts with me, she said. Her voice was small, matter of fact, like she was reporting the weather. Jack looked over at her. Yeah? She made things out of paper, flowers and birds and stuff. Lily picked up one of the pine cones and turned it slowly in her fingers. She had really soft hands. Jack didn't say anything. He had learned already that Lily didn't need him to fill the silence. She just needed him to stay in it with her. She and Daddy went away when Max was still in Mama's belly, Lily continued. Her brow furrowed a little. There was a car, and then they were just gone. She set the pine cone back down carefully in its place. Aunt Diane said they weren't coming back. Jack's jaw tightened. He kept his face still. Is Aunt Diane your step-aunt? He asked. Lily nodded. She smells like cigarettes, and she talks really loud on the phone all the time. She paused. She told me I was a burden. That means too much trouble. She glanced up at Jack to see if he already knew the word. I looked it up in a dictionary at school. I know what it means, Jack said quietly. Lily looked back at her pine cones. She said that a lot. Burden, like it was my name. She said it without anger. That was the part that hit Jack the hardest. Not the words themselves, but the calm, resigned way she said them. Like she had decided a long time ago to just accept it. Max made a small sound, and Lily immediately shuffled over to him on her knees. She touched his little hand with 2 fingers. He grabbed them without opening his eyes, and she smiled. It was the most natural, pure thing Jack had ever seen. He always does that, she said softly. Even when he's asleep, he holds on. Jack looked at the 2 of them. The small girl with her tangled hair and her careful, watchful eyes. The baby who grabbed on even in sleep, like he knew he needed to hold tight to the one good thing he had. Something shifted in Jack's chest. It was not a comfortable feeling. It was more like something that had been sealed shut for a very long time was cracking open at the edges. Slow, quiet, unstoppable. Lily looked up at him then. Do you have a family? She asked. Jack thought about the question for a moment. Not really, he said. Not anymore. She seemed to accept that the same way she accepted most things, quietly. Then she looked back at her brother and smoothed the blanket over his small legs with careful, deliberate hands. Hands that were way too used to looking after someone else. Jack set down his cold mug on the windowsill. He looked at the 2 of them in the firelight. The orange glow moved across their faces, and he felt something settle deep in his chest. Something solid. He didn't say it out loud. There was no one to say it to. But the promise formed anyway, clear and steady, in the quietest part of him. These 2 kids were never going to feel like a burden again. Not as long as he was breathing. The fire had burned down to low, glowing coals by the time evening came. Lily was asleep on her pile of blankets, curled up small with one hand tucked under her cheek. Her breathing was slow and even. She had fought sleep for a while, sitting up straight and blinking hard every few minutes like she was afraid to let her guard down. But eventually, her eyes had closed, and she had tipped sideways onto the blankets without even stirring. Jack had covered her with an extra quilt. Then, he had settled into the chair closest to Max. He watched the baby. He always watched the baby now. It had become a habit over the last 2 days, the way breathing was a habit. He didn't think about it. He just did it. Max was on his back on the folded blanket, his small chest rising and falling, rising and falling. Jack counted the breaths the way a man counts steps when he's crossing uncertain ground, steady and careful, and not thinking too far ahead. Then, around 9 in the evening, the pattern changed. It was subtle at first. Jack almost missed it. The rise of Max's chest became a little uneven, a little shallow, like the baby was working harder than he should have been just to pull in air. Jack leaned forward in his chair, elbows on his knees, watching. Then Max made a sound, not a cry, more like a strained little grunt. His small face scrunched up. His lips, which should have been pink, looked pale in the low firelight. Jack was out of the chair before he had finished the thought. He knelt beside the baby and put one big, rough hand gently on Max's chest. He could feel the uneven rhythm under his palm. Too fast, too shallow. The baby's skin felt cool and clammy to the touch. "Hey," Jack said quietly. His voice was low and steady, the way he talked to a spooked animal. "Hey, little man, I got you." Max's eyes fluttered open. They were glassy and uncertain. He made the strained sound again, and his tiny fingers opened and closed against the blanket. Jack kept his hand on the baby's chest and thought fast. He had spoken that morning to Doc Reeves, an old contact who owed him more than one favor and who had seen more unusual cases than most licensed doctors ever would. Doc had walked him through what to watch for and what to do if things got worse, before the specialist could be arranged. Jack had listened carefully. He had asked questions. He had written things down on the back of a gas receipt, which was now folded in the front pocket of his flannel shirt. He pulled it out with his free hand and read it again in the dim light. Then he got to work. He elevated Max's upper body slightly, rolling an extra blanket into a firm wedge shape and positioning it with the same careful attention he used when aligning an engine part. He kept the baby warm, but not overheated. He talked to him. Low, steady words. Nothing fancy. Just his voice, constant and close, cutting through the quiet. "You're all right. I'm right here. Not going anywhere." Max fussed and squirmed for a while. His breathing stayed uneven and labored. Jack did not move from his spot on the floor beside him. He just stayed there, one hand resting lightly near the baby, watching every breath. An hour passed, maybe more. Then, gradually, the rhythm began to slow into something steadier. Max's scrunched expression softened. His fingers stopped clutching at the blanket. His chest rose and fell with a little more ease, a little less struggle. Jack let out a long, slow breath of his own. He stayed on the floor. He did not go back to the chair. He stretched his legs out and leaned his back against the side of the couch and kept his eyes on Max the whole time. The baby's color was a little better. His breathing was calmer. But Jack had felt enough of the world's hard edges to know that calmer did not mean fixed. This was not over, not by a long stretch. Morning came gray and quiet. Jack had not slept. He had sat on that floor the entire night, watching Max breathe, counting the rise and fall of that small chest, until the pale winter light began creeping through the frosted window above the sink. Lily woke up around 7. She rubbed her eyes and looked over at Jack on the floor, and didn't say anything for a moment. Just studied him the way children do when they are trying to understand something big. "Is Max okay?" she asked. "He had a rough night," Jack said. "But he's resting now." Lily crawled over to her brother and looked at his face. She touched his hand gently with 2 fingers, the way she always did. Then she looked up at Jack with those serious brown eyes. "You stayed up all night, didn't you?" It wasn't really a question. "Yeah," Jack said. She nodded, like that settled something important for her. Then she sat down beside her brother and stayed close, and Jack pushed himself up off the floor with a quiet grunt and started moving. He had supplies to gather. Doc Reeves had given him a short list of things to have on hand, and Jack had already pulled most of it together, but there were a few gaps. He moved around the cabin methodically, checking the small kit he had put together on the kitchen table. A soft cloth, a bowl for cool water, the small bottle of infant medicine Doc had told him to keep nearby. A clean thermometer he had picked up 2 days ago at a gas station 20 miles out. He lined everything up on the table in a neat row, the way he laid out tools before working on a bike. Organized. Ready. Then he heard Lily's voice from across the room. It was small and tight. "Jack." He turned. She was looking at Max. Her hand was resting on the baby's forehead, and her face had gone pale. Jack crossed the room in 4 steps. He reached down and pressed the back of his hand to Max's forehead, the way Doc had shown him. His stomach dropped. The baby was burning up. Max's skin was dry and hot to the touch, far too hot, and his small face was flushed a deep, uneven red. His lips looked dry. He was breathing fast and shallow again, little panting breaths that came too quickly and didn't seem to be doing enough work. His eyes were half open but unfocused, like he was looking at something far away that no one else could see. "Okay," Jack said. He kept his voice steady for Lily's sake. "Okay." He reached for the thermometer and took the baby's temperature. When the number came up, he looked at it for 1 silent second. Then he set it down on the table face down. It was higher than Doc had told him to watch for, a lot higher. Lily had both hands clasped together in her lap, and she was watching Jack's face with wide, frightened eyes. She didn't ask what the number was. She already knew something was wrong. Children always know. "Is he going to be okay?" she whispered. "I'm going to make sure of it," Jack said. He meant it down to the bone. He got Max cooled down with a soft, damp cloth, working gently and carefully, talking to the baby the whole time in that same low, steady voice. Then he stood up, pulled the gas receipt from his shirt pocket, and flipped it over. On the back, in his own cramped handwriting, was a different number. One he had written down but hoped he wouldn't need. A specialist, not just a contact, a real one. Someone with actual training and actual equipment, who operated far outside official channels for reasons Jack had never asked about and didn't need to know. He picked up his phone and dialed. It rang twice. "I need you out here today," Jack said when the line picked up. "Not tomorrow. Today. The baby took a bad turn and we're out of time." The voice on the other end of the phone was calm, almost too calm. "I can come," the man said, "but not to the cabin. Too exposed. You bring the baby to me." Jack didn't like it. He pressed his jaw tight and looked across the room at Max lying on the blankets, small and flushed, and breathing too fast. He looked at Lily, sitting beside her brother with her knees pulled up to her chest, and her eyes fixed on Jack's face. He didn't like it. But he didn't have a choice. "Where?" Jack said. The man gave him an address. A veterinary clinic about 30 miles north. Closed on Sundays. Private. Jack knew the area. He had ridden through it a dozen times over the years. Knew the roads like the back of his hand. Knew which ones were watched and which ones weren't. That was the problem. He hung up and stood at the kitchen table for a long moment. His fingers spread flat on the wood surface. His mind was already moving, mapping the route out in his head, turning it over and looking at it from every angle the way he would look at a seized engine, searching for the weak spots. There were a few roads up that way that made him uneasy. a stretch of highway that cut past territory belonging to a crew called the Iron Thirds. They were not friends. They were not enemies exactly either, but they were the kind of people who noticed things. A Hell's Angel riding alone in winter with a baby bundled against his chest would absolutely get noticed. Jack pulled on his jacket and stepped outside for a few minutes. The cold air hit him clean and sharp. Snow had fallen again overnight, and everything was white and still and silent. He stood on the small porch and thought hard. There was a back route, longer by about 20 minutes. It wound through old logging roads that were rough and slow in winter, but kept well away from the Iron Third's usual ground. Jack had used those roads before, years back, when he needed to move quietly. The roads were narrow and dark under the tree cover, but they were safe. He went back inside and called his contact Remy, a quiet and careful man Jack had trusted for 15 years. "I need eyes on the logging road off Route 9 North," Jack said. "The old birchwood cut. You know it?" "I know it," Remy said. "Tell me if it's clean." There was a pause. 20 minutes went by. Jack spent those 20 minutes packing a small bag. He wrapped Max in an extra blanket, thick and soft, and prepared a small bottle. He checked Max's temperature again, and his stomach tightened at the number, but he pushed that down and kept moving. His phone buzzed. "Road's clean," Remy said. "Fresh tracks from a logging truck this morning, but nothing else. You're good." "Thank you," Jack said. He set the phone down and looked at Lily. She had been watching him the whole time, taking in every phone call, every movement, every expression on his face with those quiet, careful eyes. She was 6 years old, and she had already learned how to read a room. That thought made something ache deep in his chest. "I have to take Max to see someone who can help him," Jack said. He kept his voice plain and direct. She deserved that. "A doctor. Someone who knows what to do." "I want to come," Lily said immediately. "I know you do." Jack crouched down so he was at her level. "But it's safer if you stay here. The cabin is warm. The door locks from the inside. I need you to stay low and stay quiet and not open that door for anybody. Not anybody. Can you do that for me?" Lily looked at him for a long moment. Her chin was trembling just slightly, but her eyes were steady. "You'll come back?" she said. "I will come back," Jack said. "I promise you that." She gave one small nod. Jack picked up Max gently and held him close against his chest, tucked him tight inside his jacket against the warmth of his body. He checked that Lily had the blankets, the water, and the small snack he had left on the table. Then he stepped out into the cold, white morning and pulled the door shut behind him. The veterinary clinic sat back from the road behind a row of bare birch trees. A single light burned above the side door. Everything else was dark and still. Jack pulled up slow and cut the engine. He sat for a moment, listening. Nothing moved. The snow muffled every sound and the trees stood silent all around him. He shifted Max carefully against his chest and felt the baby stir, a small, restless movement, a soft whimper that barely carried in the cold air. "Easy," Jack murmured. "We're here. You're okay." He climbed off the bike and moved toward the side door. Before he could knock, it opened. The man standing in the doorway was short and broad, somewhere in his 50s, with silver hair cropped close to his head and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He wore a plain gray sweater and had the calm, unhurried look of someone who had seen a great many difficult things and was no longer rattled by any of them. "You Thompson?" the man said. "Yeah," Jack said. "Come in." His name was Dr. Aldrich Boone. Jack had heard of him through the network, a former emergency physician who had left hospital work under circumstances that nobody talked about in detail, but that had not involved anything shameful. He had simply grown tired of the system. Now he worked quietly on the edges of it, doing good for people who had no other options. He asked few questions and kept everything he knew to himself. Jack stepped inside. The room was a back examination space, clean and bright, with metal surfaces and supply cabinets lining the walls. It smelled of antiseptic and something faintly herbal. Dr. Boone closed the door and turned to look at Max. "Tell me what you know," he said. Jack talked. He laid out everything he had observed since that first morning in the cabin. The irregular breathing, the pallor, the fever that had come and come back again. The way Max's lips had gone faintly bluish during the worst moments. The way his small body seemed to work too hard just to do the things that should have been easy. Dr. Boone listened without interrupting. His eyes were on Max the entire time. When Jack finished, the doctor stepped forward and held out his hands. "May I?" he said. Jack hesitated for just a second. Then he transferred Max carefully into the doctor's arms. Watching someone else hold Max felt strange. Jack stood with his arms empty and his hands loose at his sides and watched Dr. Boone carry the baby to the examination table and begin a careful, methodical assessment. He checked Max's breathing, his heart rate, the color of his skin, and his fingertips. He used a small device Jack didn't recognize and noted the reading with a quiet sound. "You were right to be concerned," Dr. Boone said, not looking up. "This baby has a cardiac condition, not uncommon in infants, but serious if left unmanaged. He needs medication to regulate the rhythm of his heart. It's manageable. He can live well with it. But he needs the right treatment." Jack exhaled slowly. The relief and the weight of it hit him at the same time. "You can do that here," Jack said. "I can start it here," Dr. Boone said. "I have what I need." He worked quietly and efficiently for the better part of an hour. Jack did not look away. He watched every careful movement the doctor made, the gentle hands, the steady focus, the way he spoke softly to Max the entire time, as if the baby could hear and understand every word. When it was done, Dr. Boone wrapped Max back in his blanket and handed him to Jack. "Keep him warm," the doctor said. "I'll arrange follow-up supplies through your contact." Jack nodded. He held Max close and headed back out into the cold. The logging road was dark and slow on the way back. Jack took every turn with care, feeling the weight of the baby pressed against him, feeling every breath Max took. By the time the cabin lights came into view through the trees, Jack was running on nothing but sheer will. He was bone-tired. His shoulders ached. His mind was heavy with everything the doctor had said and everything that still lay ahead. He cut the engine and sat still for a moment in the cold dark, just breathing. Then he got up, walked to the cabin door, and knocked twice so Lily would know it was him. The door creaked open and Lily's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes were wide and searching. When she saw Jack, she pulled the door open the rest of the way and stepped back to let him in. "Is Max okay?" she said. Her voice was small but steady. She had been holding herself together all evening. Jack could see it in the set of her jaw and the way her small hands gripped the hem of her sweater. "He's going to be okay," Jack said. The doctor helped him. Lily looked at Max bundled in Jack's arms. Then she let out a long breath, and her whole body seemed to soften. She reached up and touched Max's cheek with 2 fingers, the way she always did, gentle and careful. "He's warm," she said. "That's good," Jack said. "That's real good." He settled Max into the nest of blankets near the fire and sat back on his heels, watching the baby's chest rise and fall in a slow, steady rhythm. It looked different already, easier, less like a struggle and more like rest. Jack put another log on the fire and didn't say anything for a long while. Neither did Lily. They just sat together in the warm light and watched Max sleep. The days that followed moved quietly. Jack was not a man who had ever kept a schedule. His life had always been shaped by the road, by jobs and calls, and the unpredictable business of being who he was. But Lily needed routine. He could see that plainly. She needed to know what was coming next. She needed to feel like the world was not going to shift under her feet without warning. So he built one. Morning started with breakfast. Jack made what he knew how to make, which was not much, but he learned fast. Scrambled eggs, oatmeal with a little honey, toast cut into triangles the way Lily liked. She always sat in the same chair and always watched him cook with the same serious, thoughtful expression, as if she were memorizing everything he did. After breakfast, Jack would tend to Max while Lily played near the fire. She had found a deck of old cards in a kitchen drawer and taught herself a game she made up on her own, with rules that changed slightly every day. Jack did not always understand the rules, but he played when she asked him to, and he played seriously, which made her happy. Afternoons were for small tasks. Jack let Lily help where she could. She folded the blankets. She handed him things when he was working. She talked while she did it. A steady, quiet stream of thoughts and questions and observations that filled the cabin in a way Jack had not expected. He had lived alone for a long time. The silence had suited him once. Now, without quite realizing when it had happened, he had stopped noticing the silence at all. Evenings were for stories. Jack did not know many stories. He had not grown up with them, but Lily did not seem to mind. She would sit beside him on the old couch with Max and his little blanket nest between them, and look up at Jack with patient, expectant eyes. So he told her things. Real things. About the mountains he had ridden through, and the strange people he had met on the road. About a dog he once had named Gravel, who could open any door in any house. About the way the desert looked at sunrise when the sky turned colors that had no proper names. Lily always listened, like every word mattered. On the fourth morning, Jack lifted Max from his blankets, and the baby blinked up at him. His color was better. His breathing was easy and even. His dark eyes were bright and curious in a way that had not been there before. "He looks at you," Lily said from across the room. She was smiling. "He really looks at you." Jack felt something move through his chest that he did not quite have a word for. Later that afternoon, Lily came and stood beside Jack while he sat at the table. She leaned into him and wrapped her small arms around his arm and pressed her cheek against his shoulder. "I feel safe," she whispered, "for the first time in a really, really long time." Jack did not move. He barely breathed. He just sat there with her leaning against him and let those words settle somewhere deep and quiet inside him. The snow had settled deep overnight. Jack stood at the cabin window in the pale gray light of early morning, a mug of coffee in one hand, watching the tree line the way he always did. It was habit, old and deep and automatic. His eyes moved slow and steady across the white expanse, reading it the way another man might read a newspaper. That was when he saw it. Tracks. They came from the east side of the tree line, shallow at first, where the snow was packed hard under the pines, then deeper as they crossed into the open clearing. Boot prints, small ones, moving toward the cabin and then stopping about 40 yards out, where the ground dipped behind a cluster of bare bushes. Someone had stood there, watching. Jack set his mug down on the windowsill without a sound. He kept his face still. Lily was still asleep. Max was quiet in his blankets. The cabin was warm and soft and peaceful, and Jack intended to keep it that way. He moved to the door with slow, deliberate steps, lifted his jacket from the hook, and pulled it on. Outside, the cold hit him clean and sharp. His boots crunched lightly as he made his way across the clearing, following the tracks with his eyes before his feet. He crouched down near the bushes and studied the ground. The prints were fresh, made sometime in the last few hours, before the thin crust of overnight freeze had had a chance to settle over them. Whoever had been standing here had not been in a hurry. They had stood still long enough to leave a deep impression. Just watching. He followed the tracks back into the tree line. They curved south, moving parallel to the road for a stretch, then cut back toward the highway. He stopped where they ended, at a wide, flat scrape in the snow. A car had parked there, idled long enough to leave a dark stain of exhaust residue on the snow behind the rear tires. Jack straightened up and looked down the empty road. He knew who it was. He did not need proof. He had enough years and enough hard experience to trust his gut, and his gut was talking loud and clear. She had come back. He went inside and called Ricky before Lily even woke up. Ricky was a short, broad-shouldered man who owed Jack more favors than either of them could count. He picked up on the second ring. "She's been around," Jack said. No greeting, no preamble. A pause on the line. Then Ricky said, "I heard. Word is she's got somebody helping her now. Guy she met through Delgado's people. They're not serious muscle, but they're not nothing either." Jack looked at the ceiling. "How close?" "Close enough that you should be careful," Ricky said. "She's been asking around town. Somebody told her the general area. She doesn't have the exact location yet, but she's circling." "All right," Jack said. "You want me to come out?" "Not yet," Jack said. "Stay ready." He hung up and stood in the quiet kitchen for a moment. Then he got to work. He checked every window latch in the cabin. He reinforced the back door with a length of timber he had stored in the shed. He moved his motorcycle around behind the cabin, where it could not be seen from the road or the clearing. He pulled a second set of keys from a kitchen drawer and tucked them into his jacket pocket. He dug out an old burner phone from the bottom of his gear bag and charged it. He wrote 2 numbers on a piece of paper in large, clear numbers and taped it inside the kitchen cupboard where he could find it fast in the dark. Then he sat at the kitchen table and thought it through. Every scenario, every angle. He mapped it out in his mind, the way he had done 100 times before in 100 different situations. The danger was not over. It had not even peaked yet. He knew that now, and knowing it, he began to prepare. The fire had burned down to a low orange glow by the time evening settled in. Jack had kept the cabin lights dim all day, just enough to see by, not enough to cast a glow through the windows that could be spotted from the tree line. Lily had noticed in the quiet, observant way she noticed everything, but she had not said much. She had sat close to Max's blanket nest on the floor, humming softly to him, running her small fingers over his cheek while he slept. Jack had watched her do that for a while. The tenderness of it, the way a 6-year-old had already learned to be a mother because nobody else was going to do it. He had turned back to the window before she could see the look on his face. Now the woods outside were dark and still. The snow caught what little moonlight filtered through the clouds and gave the clearing a pale, silver quality. Quiet. Cold. Beautiful in the way that dangerous things sometimes are. Jack stood to the side of the window, not in front of it. He kept his shoulder against the wall and watched through the edge of the glass, the way you watch when you do not want to be seen watching. He waited. 20 minutes passed. Maybe more. Then he saw it. A light. Small and brief. Like the glow of a phone screen being checked and quickly dimmed again. It came from the south side of the tree line, about 60 yards out, just past the big split-trunk pine he used as a landmark. It flashed once and went dark. Jack's jaw tightened. He counted. 1, 2, 3. He kept his breathing slow and even. The light appeared again. Same spot. Same brief flare of pale blue light. Someone checking a screen in the dark, trying to be careful, not quite careful enough. He pulled back from the window and crossed the cabin in silence. He crouched beside Lily and touched her shoulder gently. She looked up at him right away. Her eyes were big and dark in the low light. "I need you to do something for me," he said quietly. His voice was calm. He made sure of that. She nodded. "I need you and Max to move to the back room, the small one. You remember where the extra blankets are?" "In the chest," she whispered. "That's right. Take 2 of them. Get comfortable on the floor, away from the window. Can you do that?" She was already gathering Max up, careful and sure-handed in the way that broke his heart every time he saw it. "Is she out there?" Lily asked. He looked at her for a moment. She deserved honesty. He had decided that early on. "Maybe," he said. "But you're safe. I promise you that." She held Max against her chest and nodded once, her small chin steady. Then she carried her brother toward the back of the cabin without another word. Jack watched her go. Then he stepped outside. The cold was sharp and immediate. He moved around the side of the cabin to the shadow of the shed wall and stood there, letting his eyes adjust fully. From this angle, he could see the split-trunk pine clearly. The light did not appear again, but he could make out a dark shape at the edge of the tree line. Still, watching the cabin the same way he had been watching the woods. He stayed in the shadow for a long moment. Then he pulled out the burner phone. Ricky picked up fast. "She's here," Jack said. "South tree line. She's got at least one other person with her." "I'm 20 minutes out," Ricky said. "Danny's with me." "Don't come in loud," Jack said. "Come in from the north road. Park at the fork and walk in. No lights." "Understood." "I need a perimeter," Jack said, his voice low and steady. "Quiet. No confrontation. The kids are in the cabin, and I am not putting them in the middle of something." "We'll be there," Ricky said. 20 minutes. Jack kept his back against the shed wall and kept his eyes on the tree line. He would hold the line until his allies arrived, whatever it took. She came out of the tree line 20 minutes later. Jack had not moved from the shadow of the shed. He had heard Ricky and Danny slip in from the north, quiet as frost, and he had given them a nod and pointed them toward the east and west flanks. They disappeared into the dark without a word. Good men. Men who knew how to be still. When the step-aunt stepped into the clearing, she had someone with her. A man. Tall, heavy-set, with his hands shoved into his coat pockets. He hung back a few steps, like he was hired muscle trying to look casual and not quite pulling it off. She walked straight toward the cabin door. No hesitation. Like she owned the place. Jack stepped out of the shadow. She stopped. For a moment, nobody said anything. The snow around them was pale and undisturbed. The woods were silent. The only sound was the distant creak of a branch settling under the weight of ice. She was a thin woman, sharp-featured with hollow cheeks and eyes that moved too fast. The kind of eyes that were always calculating. She wore a heavy coat that was a size too big, and boots that were not made for this kind of snow. She had come in a hurry. "I want the kids," she said. Her voice was hard, but there was something underneath it. A tremor she was trying to keep buttoned down. "They're not yours to want," Jack said. "They're my family," she said. "You took them. That's kidnapping. I'll go straight to the police. I will do it tonight." Jack looked at her for a long moment. He did not raise his voice. He did not step toward her. He just stood there in the cold with his arms at his sides, steady as the pines around them. "Go ahead," he said. She blinked. That was not the answer she had expected. "I'm serious," she said louder now. "I will have you arrested. You'll lose everything." "You go to the police," Jack said quietly, "and you'll need to explain some things yourself." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. He held it out at his side, not offering it, just letting her see it. $17,000, he said. "That's what you owe Denton Briggs. You remember Denton. He runs product through the east side. You borrowed from him 6 months ago, and you've been paying him back in ways that would land you in a cell for a very long time." Her face went still. "I've also got records of 2 transactions," Jack continued, "both of them involving Lily. Both of them documented. Dates, amounts, the names of the men you were dealing with." He paused. "You walk into a police station. All of that walks in with you." The man behind her shifted his weight. He glanced at her sideways, like he was reconsidering his evening plans. "You can't prove any of that," she said. But the hardness in her voice had cracked somewhere in the middle of the sentence, and they both heard it. "I don't need to prove it in a courtroom tonight," Jack said. "I just need to hand it to the right people. And I've got a long list of right people." She stood there in the snow, her breath coming out in small white clouds. Her eyes moved to the envelope, and then back to his face. Whatever she had been planning to say, she swallowed it. The heavy-set man behind her took a quiet step back toward the tree line. She noticed. She looked at him. He looked away. Her jaw tightened. She pulled her coat closer around herself, a sharp, jerky movement, like she was holding herself together by force of will. "This isn't over," she said. "Not yet," Jack agreed. "But tonight it is." She held his gaze for one more second. Then she turned and walked back toward the tree line, her boots punching through the snow crust with every step, the heavy-set man falling in beside her. Jack watched until the dark swallowed them both. The storm rolled in, just before noon. Jack had seen it coming. The sky had turned that particular shade of white-gray that meant business, not the soft gray of a light dusting. This was the heavy, pressing kind, the kind that settled over everything like a lid clamping shut. Within an hour, the wind had picked up and the snow was coming sideways. He checked the window latches. He checked the firewood stacked along the side wall inside the cabin. Plenty. He checked the pantry. Enough canned goods and dry food to last several days, without trouble. He had always kept the cabin stocked. Old habit. A man in his line of life learned to be ready for being cut off from the world. He checked Max last. The baby was lying on the pile of folded blankets near the fire, the soft glow of the flames touching his small face. His color was better than it had been 3 days ago. The specialist had been clear about what to watch for, and Jack had memorized every word of it. He crouched down and pressed the back of 2 fingers very gently against Max's cheek. Warm. Not hot. Good. Max stirred at the touch. His eyes opened, dark and round, and he looked up at Jack with that steady, unfocused gaze that babies had, like they were looking at something just behind your face. Then he made a soft sound. Not crying. More like a question. "Yeah," Jack said quietly. "Storm's here. We're staying put." Max blinked. Then his mouth curved at the corners. Jack sat back on his heels. Something in his chest moved in a way he did not quite have a name for. "He smiled at you," Lily said from the doorway of the back room. She was standing in her socks, her hair loose around her face, wearing the oversized flannel shirt Jack had given her as a sleep shirt 3 nights ago. She had refused to take it off since then. She said it was warm. Jack suspected she just liked it. "Maybe," Jack said. "It was definitely a smile," she said, walking over and dropping down beside Max on the blankets. She took his tiny hand in both of hers. "He doesn't smile at just anybody. He smiled at me first, and that took 2 whole weeks." She looked up at Jack with something very close to pride. "You're doing good." Jack cleared his throat. He stood up and turned toward the stove. "You hungry?" "Yes," she said. "Can we have the soup again? The one with the little noodles?" "I only have 1 more can of that." "That's okay," she said cheerfully. "We can save half for later." He put the soup on. Outside, the wind threw a hard gust against the cabin wall, and the whole structure gave a low groan in response. Lily looked at the window. The glass was almost completely white with driven snow. "Are we stuck?" she asked. "For today," Jack said. "Maybe tomorrow too." She thought about that. Then she nodded, like it was acceptable news. "Okay." She looked back at Max. "We can keep him company." They ate lunch with Max, propped between 2 rolled blankets near the fire. Lily talked the whole time, the way she did when she felt safe, her words tumbling over each other in no particular hurry. She told Jack about a cartoon she used to watch before everything went wrong. She told him about a dog her neighbor had owned that she was convinced was part wolf. She told him about a game she had invented that involved pillows and a set of rules so complicated that Jack lost the thread twice. He let her talk. He found that he liked the sound of her voice filling up the cabin. It was a sound the cabin had never had before. It made the place feel different, bigger somehow, even though it was exactly the same four walls it had always been. After lunch, Lily challenged him to a game she called Floor Lava. The rules were exactly as complicated as he had feared. He played anyway. The storm quieted sometime after midnight. Jack knew because the sound changed. The hammering of wind against the walls softened into something steadier and lower. Snow was still falling, but the anger had gone out of it. He sat near the window with a cold cup of coffee in his hand and listened to the silence settle in around the cabin like a held breath. Finally, let go. Lily was asleep. Max was asleep. The fire had burned down to a deep orange glow. Jack set the cup on the table and picked up his phone. He had been putting this call off for 2 days. Not because he was afraid. Fear was not exactly the right word for what he felt when he thought about Darnell Briggs. It was something more complicated than fear. Something closer to the feeling you get standing at the edge of a very high ledge. Not panic, just a sharp and honest awareness of how far down it goes. Darnell Briggs ran the Ironback crew out of the Eastern Valley. He was not a Hell's Angel. He was something older and less organized, and in some ways more dangerous because of it. Jack and Darnell had a history that stretched back more than 15 years. They had been allies once, briefly, then rivals, then something in between that had no clean name. They had not spoken in over 3 years. Jack dialed. It rang 4 times. Then a voice came on, low and measured, like a man who never needed to raise it to be heard. "Thompson." "Briggs," Jack said. A pause, long enough to mean something. "It is late." "I know. So talk." Jack leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He kept his voice level. "I need a guarantee. Full protection. No interference from outside parties on a situation I am managing. I need it to hold for as long as it needs to hold." Another pause. "What situation?" "2 kids," Jack said. 6 years old and 9 months. They are with me. There is a woman who wants them back for reasons that have nothing to do with caring about them. I need her to understand that the door is permanently closed." The silence on the other end stretched out. Jack did not fill it. He had learned long ago that the man who talks first, in a silence like that, is the man who loses ground. "Kids," Darnell said finally. Not a question. "Just the word," said slowly, like he was turning it over. "Yeah." "You went soft, Thompson." "Maybe," Jack said. "Or maybe I just know what is worth protecting." He heard a sound on the other end that might have been a short laugh. Might not have been. Hard to tell with Darnell. "This woman," Darnell said. "She connected to anyone I should know about?" "She owed money to Reeves over in the West District. I already handled that leverage. But she is stubborn, and she is desperate. And desperate people find allies in places you do not expect." Jack paused. "I am not asking for a favor. I am offering a trade. You have wanted the Millfield route access for 2 years. You can have it. Full clearance. No interference from my side." The silence this time was shorter. "The Millfield route," Darnell said. "Yes." "That is not a small thing to offer." "No," Jack said. "It is not." Another pause. Jack could hear the faint sound of something in the background on Darnell's end. A television, maybe. Ordinary sounds of an ordinary late night. It almost seemed strange. Then Darnell spoke again, and his voice had shifted slightly. Not warmer exactly, but something in it had settled. "Those kids are not going to be touched. Not by this woman. Not by anyone connected to her. Not by anyone who wants to test whether I mean it." A beat. "You have my word." Jack closed his eyes for just a moment. "Good enough," he said. "Thompson," Darnell said, just before Jack pulled the phone away. "Yeah. You always did have more guts than sense. There was something almost like respect in it. Get some sleep." The call ended. The morning came in quiet and white and clean. Jack stood at the cabin window with his coffee and watched the snow outside catch the early light. Everything looked still. The trees were heavy with it, their branches bowed low, like they were resting. The world beyond the glass had a softness to it that felt almost unreal after the hard days that had come before. Behind him, Max made a small sound from his blanket nest near the fire. Jack turned. The baby was awake, blinking slowly, his dark eyes catching the firelight. His cheeks had color in them again. Real color, not the gray-tinged paleness that had kept Jack up through so many nights. Pink and warm and alive. Jack walked over and crouched beside him. Max looked up at him and kicked both feet at once, a little burst of energy, like he was testing them out. "There you go," Jack said quietly. "There you go, buddy." Max reached up one small fist toward Jack's face. Jack let the baby grab his finger. The grip was stronger than it had been a week ago, noticeably stronger. Jack felt something loosen in his chest that he had not even realized was still pulled tight. Lily appeared in the doorway of the small side room, her hair tangled from sleep, her sock feet shuffling on the wooden floor. She stopped when she saw Max kicking and squirming, and her whole face changed. "He looks good," she said. Her voice was soft, like she was almost afraid to say it out loud in case it stopped being true. "He does," Jack said. "Slept through the whole night. Ate good this morning, too." Lily crossed the room and sat down on the floor beside her brother. She leaned over him and made a silly face. Max stared at her for a second. Then his little mouth stretched wide into a gummy, full-faced smile. Lily laughed. It was a real laugh, bright and sudden, and it bounced off the cabin walls like it had been waiting a long time to get out. Jack stood up and headed to the kitchen. He had been planning this since the night before. Nothing fancy. He was not the kind of man who knew how to do fancy. But he had supplies he had been saving, and he figured if there was ever a day that called for something more than plain oatmeal and canned soup, today was it. He pulled out a small pack of pancake mix, a jar of honey, a can of peaches he had been keeping on the back shelf, and a bar of dark chocolate he had tucked into his jacket pocket during his last supply run. He also had a small tin of hot cocoa mix, the good kind, with the little marshmallows already in it. He started the stove and got to work. The smell of pancakes filled the cabin slowly, warm and sweet and golden. Jack flipped each one carefully and stacked them on a plate near the stove to keep them hot. He opened the peaches and poured them into a small pan with a spoonful of honey and let them heat until they were soft and syrupy. Lily appeared at the kitchen doorway with Max propped on her hip, his head resting against her shoulder. Her eyes went wide when she saw the stack of pancakes. "Are those for us?" she asked. "Who else would they be for?" Jack said, without looking up from the stove. She carried Max to the small table and settled into her chair, situating the baby carefully in her lap. Jack set a plate down in front of her, a short stack of pancakes, the warm peaches spooned over the top, a small drizzle of honey catching the light like amber. Lily stared at it. "Go on," Jack said. She picked up her fork and took a bite. Her eyes closed for just a second. "It is really good," she said. "Do not sound so surprised," Jack said, and he almost smiled. He sat down across from them. Max reached toward the table with both hands, opening and closing his fingers at nothing in particular. Lily laughed again and leaned down to kiss the top of his head. The cabin was warm. The fire crackled softly behind them, and for the first time in as long as Jack could remember, the sound of laughter filled every corner of the room. 2 days after the storm broke, Jack made a phone call he had been putting off for longer than he should have. He stepped outside onto the cabin porch while Lily was occupied stacking wooden blocks with Max on the floor inside. The cold air hit him sharp and clean. He could see his breath in small white clouds. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a name he had not dialed in years. Ernie Dodd. Ernie was not a Hell's Angel. He was not outlaw connected in any way. He was a short, soft-spoken attorney who worked out of a small office above a hardware store in a town about 40 minutes from the cabin. Jack had done Ernie a significant favor once, a long time ago, involving a situation with Ernie's nephew and some very bad people. Ernie had told Jack then that if he ever needed anything legal handled quietly, he should call. Jack had never called. Until now. The phone rang twice. "Dodd speaking. It is Jack Thompson." A pause. Then, "Jack Thompson. Well, I did not expect to hear from you." "I need help," Jack said. He kept his voice low and even. "Legal help. The kind that needs to stay quiet." Another pause, shorter this time. "Tell me what you have got." Jack told him. Not everything at once, but enough. 2 children, a step-aunt who had tried to sell one of them, a baby with a medical condition. No parents in the picture. Jack had been caring for them, keeping them safe, but he had no legal standing. Nothing on paper. And without something on paper, that woman could walk back into their lives any time she wanted and take them. Ernie listened without interrupting. That was something Jack had always respected about him. When Jack finished, Ernie was quiet for a moment. "Can you come in?" he asked. "In person. I need to see what documentation exists and what we are working with." "I can come Thursday," Jack said. "Thursday works. Come to the back entrance." Jack ended the call and stood there on the porch for a moment, looking out at the snow-covered tree line. He felt something he was not entirely used to feeling. Not hope, exactly. More like the first small step towards something solid. Thursday came cold and gray. Jack left Lily and Max in the care of Hector, an old and trusted friend who had helped Jack during the worst of Max's health scare. Hector was good with the kids, quiet and steady in a way that did not spook them. Lily had warmed up to him faster than Jack expected. The drive into town was uneventful. Jack parked 2 blocks away from the hardware store and walked the rest on foot, his collar pulled up and his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. Ernie's office was small and cluttered with stacks of folders and thick binders. It smelled like old paper and coffee. A single lamp on the desk put out a warm yellow circle of light. Ernie stood up when Jack came in and shook his hand with both of his. They sat down and got to work. Jack laid out everything he had. He had been gathering it quietly for days. A handwritten statement from the contact, who had confirmed the step-aunt's debts and criminal dealings. Documentation of the medical care Max had received. Dates, times, names of witnesses who could testify to what the step-aunt had attempted to do with Lily. Ernie went through it all carefully, his reading glasses low on his nose, making small notes in the margins of a yellow legal pad. After nearly 2 hours, Ernie set down his pen and folded his hands on the desk. "Jack," he said, "based on what you have brought me, I can file for emergency protective custody on your behalf. Given the evidence of abuse, neglect, and criminal intent on the part of the step-aunt, I do not anticipate significant resistance from the court." He looked at Jack over the top of his glasses. "These children are safe from her. I am confident of that." Jack said nothing for a moment. He just nodded once, slow and steady, and let out a long breath. He felt like he had been holding for weeks. The days settled into something Jack had not known in a long time. Routine. Every morning started the same way. Jack was up first, before the sun cleared the tree line. He made coffee, strong and black, and stood at the kitchen window watching the pale light spread across the snow. Then he got to work on breakfast. Eggs, toast, sometimes oatmeal with a little honey for Lily. Lily came padding out of the back bedroom every morning in her oversized wool socks, her dark hair sticking up in every direction. She always stopped in the doorway first, like she needed a moment to confirm that the cabin was still real, that Jack was still there. Every morning he was. "Morning, kiddo," he would say, without turning from the stove. And every morning she would say, "Morning, Jack," in her small, sleepy voice, and then climb up onto her chair at the table like she had been doing it her whole life. Getting Lily enrolled in school had taken some careful maneuvering on Jack and Ernie's part. With the emergency protective custody filing in motion, Ernie had been able to provide enough documentation to get Lily registered at the small elementary school in town. It was a quiet, older building, with a green front door and a playground that backed up against a row of pine trees. Lily had stood in front of it on her first day, backpack on, staring up at it with wide eyes. "You do not have to be scared," Jack told her. She looked up at him. "I am not scared," she said. Then she squared her little shoulders and walked right through the green door. Jack stood on the sidewalk for a full minute after she disappeared inside. He was not entirely sure what he was feeling. Something that sat warm and strange in the middle of his chest. He picked her up every afternoon at 3 o'clock, parking the truck along the curb and waiting with the heat running. She always came out fast, her backpack bouncing, scanning the line of vehicles until she spotted him. Then she ran. Every single time she ran. Back at the cabin, Max ruled the afternoon hours. He had grown stronger in the weeks since his treatment. The pale, worrying color was gone from his cheeks. He was rounder, louder, full of an energy that surprised Jack every time. Max had taken to pulling himself up along the edge of the couch cushions and bouncing on unsteady legs, grinning at whoever was watching him like he expected applause. Jack usually gave it to him. "Look at you," Jack would say, crouching down to Max's level. "You showing off again?" Max would shriek with delight and bounce harder. Lily had assigned herself the role of Max's most devoted audience. She sat on the floor with him for long stretches of the afternoon, rolling a soft ball back and forth, stacking plastic cups, and letting him knock them down, narrating everything he did in a cheerful running commentary that made the cabin feel full of sound in a way Jack had never experienced before. It was loud sometimes, messier than Jack was used to. There were toys on the floor and crumbs on the table and small fingerprints on the window glass. Jack did not mind a single bit of it. That evening, after Max had been fed and bathed and put down in his crib with his favorite worn stuffed rabbit tucked under his arm, Jack and Lily settled on the couch in front of the fire. Lily had picked out a book from the small shelf Jack had stocked up on during a supply run the week before. It was a story about a bear who got lost in a forest and found his way home by following the stars. Jack read it aloud in his low, rumbling voice, one big arm around Lily's shoulders, her small head resting against his side. When he got to the part where the bear finally spotted the lights of his den through the trees, Lily giggled. "He is just like you," she said. Jack looked down at her. "How is that?" She tilted her head up at him, her eyes bright in the firelight. "He is big and grumpy, but he always finds his way home." Jack felt the corner of his mouth pull up. "Big and grumpy," he repeated. "A little bit," she said, holding her finger and thumb an inch apart and grinning. Jack shook his head slowly, but the smile stayed. He turned the page and kept reading, the fire crackling beside them, the cabin warm and quiet and full. The morning came in clear and bright. Jack noticed it the moment he pulled back the curtain above the kitchen sink. The sky was a deep, clean blue, the kind that only showed up after a heavy snowfall had scrubbed the air clean. The snow outside lay thick and undisturbed, spreading across the yard and into the tree line like a white blanket pulled tight over the world. He stood there a moment, coffee mug in hand, just looking at it. Lily appeared at his elbow without a sound, the way she sometimes did. She had gotten better at sneaking up on him. He pretended not to notice. "Snow," she said, her voice full of something reverent. "Yep," Jack said. She pressed her nose against the glass. Her breath fogged up a small circle on the window. "Can we go outside?" Jack took a slow sip of his coffee. He let her wait just long enough that she turned to look at him with big, hopeful eyes. "Go get your coat," he said. She was gone before he even finished the sentence. Getting all three of them bundled up turned out to be its own kind of adventure. Lily pulled on her coat herself, fast and lopsided, one side of the collar tucked under and the other sticking up. Jack straightened it without comment. Max required 2 layers, a thick knit hat pulled down over his ears, mittens that he immediately tried to pull off, and a look of great personal offense at the whole process. "Hold still," Jack muttered, working the second mitten back onto Max's chubby hand for the 3rd time. Max grabbed Jack's finger instead and squeezed it, grinning like he had won something. "You think this is funny," Jack said flatly. Max squealed. Lily watched from the doorway, already hopping from foot to foot. "He is laughing at you," she announced. "I noticed," Jack said. He got Max settled against his chest in the front carrier he had picked up during one of his supply runs. The baby fit snug and warm against him, cheeks round and pink above the collar of his little coat. Max looked out at the world from that position with wide, curious eyes, like a small captain surveying his territory. Jack zipped his own jacket over the carrier to block the wind. He pulled on his gloves. Then he opened the cabin door and stepped out. The cold hit clean and sharp. The snow crunched under his boots. Lily burst past him with a shout of pure delight and ran 3 full steps before plunging face first into a drift that came up past her knees. She came up laughing, snow on her chin and her eyelashes, her arms spread wide. "It is so deep," she called out, like she was reporting important news. Jack stepped off the porch and into the yard. Max made a small sound against his chest, something between a gasp and a coo. His eyes had gone wide at the brightness of it all. He looked down at the snow with total fascination and then looked up at Jack like he needed an explanation. "Snow," Jack told him quietly. "It is called snow." Max reached one mittened hand downward, straining toward the white surface below. "Not yet, bud," Jack said. Lily was already rolling a ball along the ground, packing snow as she went. Her tongue stuck out in concentration. It grew slowly, collecting snow and bits of dead grass, leaving a winding trail across the yard behind her. "I am making the bottom part," she announced. "It needs to be really big." Jack watched her for a moment. Then he crouched down, scooped a handful of snow, and started packing it himself. He worked it into a tight, even sphere, turning it over in his gloved hands, smoothing the surface. Lily stopped rolling and stared at him. "You know how to make a snowman?" she asked, like this genuinely surprised her. Jack gave her a look. "I was a kid once." She seemed to seriously consider this. "A long time ago," she decided. "A long time ago," he agreed. They worked side by side after that. Lily rolled the base while Jack shaped the middle. The snow packed well in the cold, firm and cooperative. Max watched from Jack's chest, making small sounds of commentary that neither of them could interpret, but both of them responded to anyway. "I think he likes it," Lily said. "He likes everything," Jack said. "He likes you the most," she said simply, without looking up from her work. Jack did not answer that, but something in his chest shifted, quiet and warm, like an ember catching hold. When the 3 sections were stacked and the snowman stood about chest high on Jack, Lily ran inside and came back with a carrot, 2 buttons, and an old wool scarf that Jack had forgotten he even owned. She arranged the face with great seriousness, pressing the buttons in deep so they held, and then wrapped the scarf around the snowman's neck with a flourish. She stepped back and put her hands on her hips. "He needs a name," she said. "Does he?" Jack said. "All snowmen need names." Jack studied the snowman. The carrot was slightly crooked. One button eye sat a little higher than the other, giving the whole face a lopsided, cheerful look. "Gerald," Jack said. Lily burst out laughing. It was a full, real laugh, the kind that bent her forward at the waist. Max startled at the sound, and then started laughing too, his whole small body bouncing against Jack's chest, his mittened hands waving. The sound of it filled the yard. It rose up into the cold blue air and scattered out over the white snow, and into the pine trees at the edge of the clearing. Jack stood in the middle of it all. One hand pressed gently over Max's back to steady him, watching Lily laugh herself breathless over a crooked snowman named Gerald. He felt it then, not in a dramatic way, not like a wave crashing over him. It was quieter than that, steadier. It felt like belonging. Lily recovered herself, wiping her eyes with the back of her mitten. She walked over to Jack and pressed herself against his side, wrapping her arms around him as far as they would go, her face turned up toward Gerald the snowman with a wide, satisfied smile. Jack put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. Max cooed softly between them. The three of them stood together in the snow, the cabin warm and waiting behind them, the sky wide and blue above them, Gerald watching over them with his lopsided button eyes. It was not the family any of them had planned on. It was not the life Jack had ever pictured for himself. But standing there in the cold winter morning, his arm around a little girl who had once begged a stranger not to sell her, a baby boy growing stronger against his chest every single day, Jack thought that maybe this was exactly the family they were all supposed to find. He held them both a little tighter. The snow sparkled around them, and the morning was warm. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.